Hello, RWorld, and welcome back to RWorld Talk. We have with us this morning Mr. Jack Weir. Jack, you have an impressive resume when it comes to housing. You're currently the president and CEO of Eastwind Development and board of director for the Housing Leadership Council of Palm Beach County. Can you tell us about your roles and what inspires you to be devoted to everything housing?
Thank you, Chris, and pleasure to be here today. My background is basically I was trained as a lawyer. And then I worked in finance, and then I moved to Florida approximately 30 years ago on the development side. I worked for a company that did predominantly affordable housing involving the housing tax credit side.
Okay.
And then 16 years ago, I started my own company doing first affordable housing and then market housing, and increasingly over recent years become involved in workforce housing as well. So it's a fascinating area, and as many of you know, it's a pressing problem in our county. So I've always been interested in policy, and this is a good outlet for that.
Well, I'm super excited to talk to you today. I actually sit on the Broward Housing Council, so housing affordability and workforce housing is something that I'm working on all the time as well. So really cool to have you here. Tell us, in 2022, there was a housing bond that passed in Palm Beach County. Can you talk about that bond and the process behind it?
Sure. There's actually, Chris, quite a backstory in it as well.
Okay.
In 2017, the Housing Leadership Council, which is a nonprofit housing advocacy group in Palm Beach County, and I'm the chairman of the board there, with Palm Beach County government organized the Housing Summit. There were over 500 attendees, and out of that, there was a housing steering committee that was born. And that committee was basically organized into 4 regions: North, Central, South, and West.
Okay.
And they came up with a series of regional recommendations. Then there was a master committee that consolidated those into 12 recommendations, and that happened in 2019. The leading recommendation, number one priority, was a dedicated local funding source for housing.
Okay.
So there was discussion at the HLC and the county level about what would be the best path, and it was decided that bonds would offer the most immediate impact. So discussions started in early 2020, and then the pandemic descended upon us.
Right.
So that put a halt to any type of funding initiative.
Put a little damper on what you were doing, right?
Quite a damper.
Okay.
So during this period, the Housing Steering Committee continued to meet. The Housing Leadership Council, working with Florida International University, commissioned a housing needs assessment. And what it illustrated was the extent of the need. Over 50% of the renters in Palm Beach County were cost burdened. And the other thing, it showed that in the pre-pandemic decade of 2010 to 2019, the supply of housing units had lagged the demand, population growth divided by household size, by 20,000 units. So that was part of the reason that we were in the fix that we were in. These trends became turbocharged during the pandemic. As you recall, in a period from 2021 to 22, rents increased by 30%. So just to put that in perspective, when we model rental increases in our pro formas, we model 3% a year.
Wow.
So imagine a scenario in which you had 10 years of rent increases consolidated into 1 year.
Huh.
Home prices appreciated by over 25%, which obviously made home ownership more difficult as well. So in 2022, under the leadership of Commissioner Bernard on the County Commission, we decided to proceed with a housing bond. And the housing bond was authorized by the County Commission in June of 2022. What that meant was it was authorized to go to the voters in a voter referendum in November.
Right.
So starting in late June, we basically had 3 months and change to come up with a campaign to persuade the voters of Palm Beach County to vote for a housing bond. So that's what we did. The key,
And that's an easy task, getting voters to vote in your favor. It's so easy.
So it was basically a political campaign. I had promised my wife I would never run for office, but this was a pretty close second.
There you go.
And we basically raised over $1 million in 3 months. And I would say, Chris, that the key to the success was having the business community supporting the efforts of the housing advocates. We had strong leadership from the Economic Council and Michelle Jacobs. We had support from the BDB, 4 chambers of commerce, of course, the realtors. and major employers like FPL, Florida Crystals. So across the board, we had a good coalition to get this across the line.
Sure.
We hired experienced political consultants, locally based public concepts, and ultimately we were successful. We received nearly 56% of the vote.
Awesome.
So it was a strong statement by the community that we don't have to just passively accept this housing crisis. We can do something about it. So, Mario,
well, thank you for all your work there, because that was incredible and certainly much needed.
So the late governor of New York, Mario Cuomo, once said that campaigning is poetry and governing is prose. So now we're in the prose part. The hard work begins.
Yeah.
So now we're trying to get these bonds out into the hands of private developers to actually build the housing, both single-family homes and rental. So that's the task, and HLC and others have been working with the county and trying to implement the program.
Awesome. Good work. Tell us about the housing plan. How was it developed in its four elements: funding and financing, planning and regulatory reform, neighborhood revitalization, and racial equity, as well as the administration of the plan that you had? So
the housing bond is part of a larger housing plan. All during the pandemic, there were monthly meetings, and then there were dozens of subcommittee meetings. We would have speakers, and then there were policy working groups. And what we would do was basically come up with a series of recommendations, and we actually reviewed housing plans from other areas of Florida and other cities in the country to see what was a good format, what seemed to have the most, to have the best presentation. So the housing plan came out of those meetings. There were over 100 stakeholders that participated across the board: attorneys, planners, lenders, realtors, developers, foundations. So we settled upon those four areas and came up with a series of action items and recommendations. So some of these call for funding, and others are best practices for municipalities. So as you indicated, there were four areas: funding and financing. Bonds were first and foremost, but not the only one. There are other sources of public financing that can be leveraged with private loans and private equity to create housing and to create workforce and affordable housing. The other was planning and regulatory reform. There are some practices that the municipalities have, or the county government has, that restrict housing in ways that seem counterintuitive. They defy common sense. And sometimes the reasons are historical. So we wanted to dig into that. It's like, why is the zoning so low on 441 or major commercial arteries? So we came up with a series of recommendations there. As you're aware, Palm Beach County is very constrained from a land standpoint. Right. And yet we have whole swaths of vacant land or nearly vacant land in historically disinvested neighborhoods. So neighborhood revitalization has to be a big part of solving this housing issue or addressing the problem in a meaningful way. The trick is to do it in a way where you improve the neighborhoods, but don't displace a lot of the existing residents that have been there for a long period of time. Right. And then the last was racial equity. And what we've tried to focus on was concrete steps that have held the Black ownership rate in Palm Beach County lower. They come down to financing obstacles, valuations, and one like title and legal issues in which we wanted to make sure that the documentation for ownership and being able to pass it on to the next generation is in place. Sure. So the county, the municipality, and developers will implement the plan. Housing Leadership Council's role in this is to basically serve as a source of support and advice, and also to keep score. I mean, like in sports, one of the things that you want to do is assess how you're doing and be able to change course if it's not working. Right. So that's how things will work with the housing plan. Okay, fantastic. So recently, Florida legislation passed the state's Live Local Act. That goes into effect on July 1st. So what does this mean, and why should realtors see this as a big win? It is a big win. It's ironic because one of the reasons that we pushed so hard for the housing bond and the housing plan was we felt that the state wasn't a reliable partner. As you well know, for close to 20 years, the state legislature swept funds from the Sadowski Housing Trust Fund, right, and used it for non-housing purposes. Frustrating to the
We
realtors.
see it every year. So frustrating.
To us. So Senator Pasadomo said that this would be a major priority, that housing would be a major priority, and she was true to her word.
Yeah, she was.
This is the most consequential housing legislation probably since the Sadowski Act in 1992. The immediate impact on funding is it more than doubles the funding. So SHIP is fully funded, over $250 million. SAIL is fully funded, over $109 million. There is a supplemental SAIL fund of $150 million a year for 10 years. There's an additional $100 million that is used for construction cost. One of the things that happened was a number of affordable deals and underwriting got caught when construction cost increases.
Right.
So this provides a supplemental source of funding to cover those. And then the Hometown Heroes program was funded from general revenues this year. So last year there was $100 million, but they took it from SAIL. So that's a little bit like robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Right.
This year was funded from general revenues, so it is actually additive on there. Still up to 150% of the area median income. It is used for down payment assistance. The amount was increased from $25,000 to $35,000, and the range of professions for which you're eligible was expanded to basically any Florida-based employer.
It's basically 5% of the purchase price down payment assistance up to $25,000
or $35,000.
Okay.
Now it's $35,000.
Now $35,000.
But as you point out, there's a limitation, 5% of the purchase price. So if the home is $300,000, then it's $15,000.
Right.
So obviously, one of the things that's happened with construction cost is the cost of construction has increased. One of the premises of the bond program is to provide gap financing to cover the difference between the cost of production, which will be higher than the restricted sale price for certain categories of workforce housing. So it can work in conjunction with the Hometown Heroes program, so that's additive. There are multiple provisions in there, but two others I'd like to point out. One is there are three new categories of property tax exemptions, local property tax exemptions. The one that will probably have the most impact is on rental housing. If you have more than 70 rent-restricted units, you are eligible for a 75% exemption in assessed value. So that applies to all taxing authorities, city, county, state, school board. And that means that your tax bill will be 75% lower if you restrict units to under 120% of area median income. If you go down to a lower rent and income level, which is the 80% of area median income, then your taxes are fully exempt for those units.
And that's huge savings, especially for a developer that's putting some serious coin into a big building.
In Palm Beach County, your taxes can easily be over $5,000 a unit, so that's a huge factor.
Yeah.
The other one, probably the most noteworthy or controversial, is the local government preemption.
We're hearing a lot about this in my world right now.
So if you have more than 40% of the units in a rental complex that are restricted to up to 120% of area median income. So in Palm Beach County, that brings you up to $90,000 for rental households. And you restrict the rents for 30 years. You basically can bypass public hearings for comprehensive plan amendments and zoning changes.
Right.
You are allowed the highest level of density that's permitted in the jurisdiction, and you're also allowed to go up to the highest building within a mile of your site that's within the jurisdiction, or 3 stories, whichever is greater. So it does offer the prospect of more height and more density for rental housing. Now, there's 2 schools of thought on this. There are certain of my developer colleagues that say, okay, we're going to show those cities, here's what we're going to do. I don't think it's that simple. You still have to comply with land development regulations. You still have to meet with concurrency. Other aspects of the project still need to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. Rather than a my way or the highway approach, I think the better way to do it is recognize that it gives you another bargaining tool in your negotiations with a county or municipality
Right.
in terms of shaping the overall design and the plan for the development.
Yeah, I see how that was going to sort of thwart some of the NIMBYism that was going on, but at the same time, I think local municipalities are a little bit nervous, wondering what's coming down the pike because they haven't seen some of this development start to happen yet. So it'll be interesting to see what developers end up doing and how much pushback they are going to get from the municipalities.
Yeah, I think municipalities still have tools to hold developers accountable. And again, I think negotiation is going to be preferable to a more hard-nosed approach. But it does express the state's frustration with some of the NIMBY efforts that we've seen prevail at the local level, stopping otherwise worthy projects.
Sure.
And providing much needed housing.
Right.
One of the objections you frequently hear is, well, this housing will cause more traffic. And as a practical matter, you're already having traffic. If people were commuting from Broward County to St. Lucie or St. Lucie County into Palm Beach County for jobs, the question is, do you want to have traffic on a lower localized level or have people taking longer trips and putting even more wear and tear on the road?
Right.
The essence of the Live Local Act, the name of it, is so that people can live near where they work.
Right.
Not only is it better for employers, it's better for them as citizens being able to participate in their communities, be closer to their children's schools. So I think one of the premises behind workforce housing is if people can live near where they work, that's a win for everybody.
Right. So you're brilliant when it comes to this stuff, and Eastwind has done a great job at developing affordable housing and some complex mixed-use projects in the state. So tell us about what drives your passion for affordable housing.
Well, always been interested in policy. I've been on the Housing Leadership Council for 10 years and been chair the last 3 years. And I see it as a problem that needs to be addressed in a way that you can make a concrete difference in people's lives. No pun intended.
Right.
And so it is the way that I choose to try and make a difference. So, I mean, we have a very successful development company. We've made a good living. This is a way that we have of giving back. It's been fun because people sometimes have a misperception that workforce housing is somewhat seedy or B-class housing. We've done 2 recent projects in Palm Beach County, the District Flats in West Palm Beach, and then also Solaire at City Center in Palm Beach Gardens. Both of those are luxury market complexes. They're very attractive, well-designed. They have workforce housing components, 10% in the Gardens, 20% in West Palm Beach,
okay,
in which the rents are below market for qualifying residents who live there.
Okay, fantastic. Are there any new development projects underway or on the horizon for affordable housing coming to our area?
Well, there's quite a bit in Palm Beach County, and one of the keys for the bond program will be providing incentives to market rate developers who previously have not provided workforce housing to integrate workforce housing into their market rate developments.
Okay.
So if they can put even 10% of the units as workforce housing and receive gap financing through the bonds and potentially a tax break through Live Local, the goal is to weave that workforce housing into market developments and provide more opportunity. A lot of the folks who we're trying to reach with this are salaried professionals. They're well educated, they work hard, they have families to support. It's just the housing market and the prices there have outstripped their ability to afford it based on their salaries.
That's incredible.
So part of the solution is really increasing the supply. And if we can do that, I think everyone will benefit.
Okay. So we're going to get into our last couple questions here, and these ones are a little off key. But if there was one single working professional in Palm Beach County that you look up to, who would that be and why?
A single working professional. Wow. So I'm going to say 2.
Okay.
And because I work closely with both of those, Michelle Jacobs at the Economic Council does a great job.
Okay.
And Kelly Smallridge at the Business Development Board has been doing it for a long time and
she's
very
incredible.
Successfully. So those are 2 folks that I work with most closely and admire a great deal.
Okay. Kelly, if you're listening, we're going to get you on RWorld Talk. Okay, curveball question here. You look like picture perfect golf pro. Do you play golf, and what's your handicap?
I play golf, but I'm around a 20, so nothing to brag about.
Okay, nothing to brag about. Last question for you, and we're going to get you back to work this morning. We always ask everybody, tell us about a little South Florida gem that that somebody who's listening right now may not know of, whether that be a favorite beach spot, a restaurant. Tell us what you like about living in South Florida. What's one spot that you think everybody should know about?
I think downtown West Palm Beach probably has the second nicest urban waterfront in the state of Florida. A very close second to St. Petersburg.
Okay.
And oddly enough, it's a real estate play. When they tore down the library and opened up that vista and created the area for the farmers market, which is now one of the very top-rated farmers markets in the nation, it really helped transform that area. And I think that's one of the things that attracts me to development. If you have a vision and you can successfully implement that vision, you can help transform people's lives. You create a setting for a whole range of experiences that they can enjoy as families, as friends, as a community. And that to me is very gratifying.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for spending your morning with us. I know you're a busy guy, so we'll let you get back to work. But thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we will see you next time right here on RWorld Talk.